My name is Layla. Standing here in the restored workshop, with the gentle smell of cedar and salt in the air, I'm reminded of the long and arduous journey I've been through to reclaim this place. It all came to a head in that explosive moment when I faced off against Jake, my mother's conniving husband. The day he struck me was a turning point. I stood on the porch, the same one where my father, Henry Thompson, had once taught me the art of working with wood. Now, it reeked of cheap whiskey and betrayal. Jake, a man in his late 30s with a constant swagger, thought he'd won. "This isn't your house anymore," he sneered, his breath laced with alcohol, before his fist connected with my face. I didn't crumble. I just stood there, tasting the metallic tang of blood on my lips, as he raged. My mother, Lily, stood behind him, her hand gripping the doorframe as if it could hold the world together. But she didn't reach out to me. She reached out to him, and that was the moment something inside me shattered. It was a far cry from the life I'd left behind 11 years ago. I was 24 then, a newly licensed architect with stars in my eyes. My hometown of Cape Harbor, with its sleepy streets and the ever-present sound of the sea, was holding me back. I wanted to prove myself in the big city, and Los Angeles seemed like the perfect place. I was giving up a lot. My father's workshop was on the water's edge, a place where he'd crafted beautiful wooden boats. He was a dreamer, a man who took his time, measured twice and cut once. His passion for his work was infectious, and I spent countless hours by his side, learning the trade. But his sudden death was a heavy blow. My mother, Lily, was a gentle soul, but she was also easily influenced. After my father's passing, she lost her way. Jake came into our lives like a hurricane. He claimed to be an investor, promising to modernize the workshop. At first, it seemed like a good thing. But as time went on, I started to notice changes. Little things at first, like tools disappearing and the stories my father had told being replaced with Jake's empty promises. I was young and angry, tired of being the one to hold everything together. So I packed my bags, caught a flight to Los Angeles, and promised myself I'd never look back. I threw myself into my work. Skyscrapers, high-profile clients, and tight deadlines became my life. For a while, the city lights and the thrill of success drowned out the guilt I felt for leaving. But I couldn't completely forget. Every year, I sent money to cover the property taxes and maintenance bills. I deluded myself into thinking that was enough, that love could be transferred through a bank account. I had no idea that Jake was slowly but surely sinking his claws deeper into my family's legacy. Then one fateful day, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line read "Workshop." The message was short and to the point. "We've decided to sell. It's time to move on." My mother wanted me to sign away my share for a measly $10,000. The offer was an insult, a slap in the face to all my father had built over the years. I reread the email again and again. My initial shock turned to cold determination. I knew that Jake was behind this. He wanted a quick sale, a quick profit, and he didn't care about the history or the craftsmanship. I closed the email and stared at the blank laptop screen. I whispered, "Huh?" Not to them, but to myself. This workshop was more than just a building. It was a testament to my father's love and dedication. If they wanted to erase his name, they'd have to go through me. The next day, I boarded a plane back to Cape Harbor. As I looked out of the window at the familiar coastline, a sense of dread washed over me. The taxi ride to the house was silent, except for the soft hum of the radio. Every mile closer felt like a step back into a past I'd tried so hard to forget. When I finally reached the house, I could see that things had changed. The once proud sign that read "Thompson's Handcrafted Boats Since 1980" had been replaced with a cheap vinyl banner that said "Coastal Marine Innovations." The shutters were peeling, the porch lights were flickering, and the yard was a mess. I took a deep breath and walked up the steps. For a moment, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Then the door opened, and there stood my mother. She looked older, her face lined with worry. "Layla?" she said, her voice uncertain. Before I could answer, Jake appeared behind her. He smirked and said, "Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter." I told him I was there to talk about the workshop. He laughed, a cruel, mocking laugh. The workshop? You mean my business? He stepped forward, chest puffed out, blocking the door. This isn't your house anymore, he said again. And then he hit me. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. I looked at him, calm and steady, and said, You're right. It's not my house, but it's not yours either. I turned and walked away, leaving him sputtering behind me. As I reached the road, I knew what I had to do. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Harris, my father's old friend and legal advisor. I told him everything that had happened, and he assured me that we could fight this. I checked into a motel and sat on the edge of the bed, holding an ice pack to my cheek. I opened my laptop and accessed the folder I'd kept for years. Inside were all the receipts, tax bills, and transfer records. And at the bottom, carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve, was the original deed. I'd added a clause when I was 20, stating that the property could only be used for handcrafted marine vessels. Jake had no idea it was there. Mr. Harris told me that the clause was our key. He promised to file an emergency injunction first thing in the morning. People like Jake never read the fine print, he said. That night, I drove down to the waterfront. The workshop lights were on, and through the dirty windows, I could see Jake pacing back and forth on the phone. He was trying to sell what was left of my father's legacy. I gripped the steering wheel and whispered, Go ahead. Try it. The next morning, I met Mr. Harris outside the courthouse. He carried a thick folder, and I carried my father's old leather notebook. Ready? He asked. I've been ready for 11 years, I replied. A local sheriff's cruiser followed us to the workshop. When we arrived, the yard was in even more disarray. Jake's truck was parked haphazardly, and inside, the sound of machinery and loud music filled the air. We walked in, and the smell hit me immediately. It was a sickly mix of chemicals and resin, nothing like the warm, earthy smell of cedar that I remembered. Jake was standing by the workbench, a beer in his hand, watching two men load fiberglass hulls onto a trailer. When he saw me, he sneered. Look who brought a lawyer, he said. You think you can just waltz back in here and take over? Mr. Harris stepped forward and calmly informed him that a temporary injunction had been issued. All sales and production had to stop until ownership was clarified. Jake laughed, but there was an edge of panic in his voice. You're kidding, right? Lily owns this place. She signed everything over. Mr. Harris opened his folder and said, Actually, she didn't. You forged her signature on the loan document, and the bank caught it. And you tried to forge Layla's too. That's forgery and wire fraud. I pulled out the copy of the deed and laid it on the workbench. This clause, I said, tapping the paper, states that this workshop can only be used for handcrafted boats. Every boat you've sold under my father's name violates this. It's all fraud. Jake's face paled. For the first time, he looked afraid. He tried to bluster his way out of it, but it was no use. My mother appeared in the doorway, looking pale and shaken. Lily, tell them to stop this, Jake pleaded. But my mother finally found her voice. You stole first, she said, her voice breaking. The sheriff stepped forward and informed Jake that he was under arrest for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Jake struggled for a moment, but in the end, he gave up. As the sheriff led him away, he hissed at me, You'll regret this. I already did for 11 years, I replied. After Jake was taken away, my mother and I stood in the workshop, surrounded by the mess. She began to cry. I didn't know, she said. He said it was a good business move. I looked at her and said, Dad didn't build this for business. He built it for love and integrity. In the weeks that followed, the trial was quick. The evidence Mr. Harris had gathered was overwhelming, and Jake pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. He was sentenced to 7 years in state prison. I stayed in Cape Harbor to rebuild the workshop. Every morning, I'd unlock the doors and start the long process of restoration. I scrubbed the floors, replaced the broken windows, and removed the layers of gray paint from the oak beams. One afternoon, while cleaning under the workbench, I found a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were my father's chisels, his compass, and a yellowed note that read, "For when you come home." I sat on the floor, holding the tools, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The day I rehung the old sign, Thompson's handcrafted boats since 1980, the air was filled with the smell of sawdust and salt. The workshop stood proud again, a symbol of resilience and the power of family. I've learned that sometimes the people you trust the most can betray you, but you can never let go of what's truly yours. The legacy my father left behind will always be mine to protect, and I'll never give up on it again.